On June 17, 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice sued Adobe for hiding a fee that could cost customers hundreds of dollars just to cancel a subscription. By April 2026, Adobe's market value had fallen from around $320 billion to just $93 billion. Adobe's general counsel, Dana Rao, called the allegations factually wrong, but the market had already delivered its verdict. This is the story of how an empire built on creative tools became synonymous with the subscription trap. To understand the collapse, you need to understand the empire. In December 1982, two computer scientists named John Warnock and Charles Geschke left Xerox's Palo Alto Research Center and started a company in Warnock's garage. They named it after the creek that ran behind his house, Adobe Creek. They had a single product, PostScript, a programming language that told printers exactly how to render text and images on a page. Steve Jobs wanted to buy the company outright for $5 million. They refused. Instead, Apple invested to acquire a 19% stake and became PostScript's first licensee. The technology powered the desktop publishing revolution. Adobe went public on the NASDAQ in August 1986 with annual revenue of $16 million. What came next was methodical, deliberate expansion. In 1990, Adobe released Photoshop. It became the definitive tool for image editing, so dominant that the brand name became a verb. In 1993, they introduced the portable document format. The PDF did not just become a product. It became a universal standard adopted across governments, law firms, hospitals, and universities worldwide. By 2003, Adobe had bundled its flagship tools, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Acrobat, into a single package called Creative Suite. It was the industry standard toolkit for every graphic designer, video editor, photographer, and marketing team on Earth. The company had achieved something rare in software, near monopoly status across multiple creative disciplines simultaneously. For nearly 3 decades, that dominance was unassailable. And then Adobe made a decision that would define it, not for the software it built, but for what it did to the customers who tried to leave it. In April 2012, Adobe's chief financial officer Mark Garrett told investors that fiscal 2013 would be the pivotal year for the company's transition. The plan: abandon the traditional model of selling software in a box for a one-time fee and shift entirely to subscriptions delivered through the cloud. The logic was sound. Adobe's revenue had historically been lumpy, spiking when a new Creative Suite version launched, then flat until the next release. A subscription model would smooth that curve, generating predictable monthly income from tens of millions of professional users who had no real alternative to Adobe's tools. In May 2013, Adobe made the transition permanent. Creative Suite 6 would be the last version sold through a perpetual license. Going forward, customers who wanted Photoshop, Illustrator, or Premiere Pro would pay a monthly fee to access them through Creative Cloud. Forever, there was no longer an option to buy the software outright. The initial reaction was negative. Longtime customers protested on forums and social media. Some felt coerced. Others resented being converted from owners into renters. But the numbers proved the skeptics wrong. Creative Cloud subscribers surpassed 1 million in 2013. By mid-2014, that number had reached 3 million. Adobe's stock, which had hovered around $30 in early 2012, climbed steadily. By 2021, it had risen more than 2,200%. Subscription revenue grew from approximately $1.14 billion in fiscal 2013 to over $20 billion in fiscal 2024. Annual revenue expanded from $4.4 billion to $21.5 billion over the same period. The model had worked completely. Historically, on November 22, 2021, Adobe stock closed at $699.54, a market capitalization of roughly $340 billion. It was the most valuable creative software company in history. But even as those numbers climbed, a different kind of number was quietly building: the count of customers who had tried to leave and couldn't. Hundreds of thousands of customers were reporting the same experience. They had signed up for what appeared to be a monthly subscription. They had tried to cancel, and then they had discovered the fee. The product at the center of the controversy was called the annual paid monthly plan. It was Adobe's most prominently marketed subscription, not a true monthly option, but an annual contract billed in monthly installments. The distinction mattered enormously. Under its terms, a customer who canceled before the year was up owed an early termination fee equal to 50% of their remaining monthly payments. Cancel in month 2 of a $55 per month Creative Cloud subscription, and the fee could exceed $275. For enterprise tier plans, the figures ran into the hundreds more. The fee itself was not the issue. Annual contracts with termination penalties are common in telecommunications and software. The issue was disclosure. According to the complaint filed by the Department of Justice on June 17, 2024, Adobe had buried the fee's existence in fine print and behind hover-over icons that most consumers never saw during the sign-up process. The plan was pre-selected as the default option on Adobe's enrollment page. Customers who signed up for what they believed was a flexible monthly subscription were in fact entering a binding annual contract, and they typically did not discover that fact until they tried to cancel. One unnamed Adobe executive had described the early termination fee internally in unambiguous terms. The fee was a bit like heroin for Adobe, that executive wrote, according to an unredacted version of the FTC's complaint. A significant source of revenue, and one the company had no apparent intention of making easier to avoid. The cancellation process itself compounded the problem. Consumers attempting to cancel were routed through multiple pages, unnecessary steps, and unsolicited retention offers. The FTC documented reports of dropped calls, chat sessions that ended without resolution, and customers who believed they had successfully canceled only to find continued charges on their credit card statements months later. Adobe's general counsel and chief trust officer Dana offered a different characterization. "We are transparent with the terms and conditions of our subscription agreements," Rao stated, "and have a simple cancellation process." The data told a different story. By the time the lawsuit was filed, the FTC had been investigating Adobe's cancellation practices since 2022, following a volume of consumer complaints that the agency described as significant. The complaint named not just the company but two executives personally, Maninder Soni, an Adobe vice president, and David Wadhwani, president of Adobe's digital media business. The government charged all three with violations of the Restore Online Shoppers Confidence Act, a federal law requiring that subscription terms be disclosed clearly and that cancellation be made simple. Samuel Levine, director of the FTC's Bureau of Consumer Protection, was direct. Adobe trapped customers into year-long subscriptions through hidden early termination fees and numerous cancellation hurdles, Levine stated. Americans are tired of companies hiding the ball during subscription sign-up and then putting up roadblocks when they try to cancel. The government was not just filing paperwork. It was describing a structural feature of Adobe's business, and it was doing so in federal court. The FTC lawsuit did not arrive in isolation. It landed on top of a company already managing a separate, self-inflicted wound. In September 2022, Adobe had announced plans to acquire Figma, a browser-based collaborative design platform, for $20 billion. The deal was intended to extend Adobe's reach into product and interface design, a segment where Figma had built a dominant position by doing something Adobe had never fully mastered, making design accessible to non-specialists through a simple, collaborative, browser-native tool. For 15 months, Adobe pursued the acquisition through regulatory review. Then, on December 18, 2023, the companies announced they were walking away. European and British antitrust regulators had concluded that combining the two dominant players in adjacent design markets would eliminate competition and raise prices. There was no viable remedy. There was no clear path to approval. Adobe terminated the deal and paid Figma a $1 billion breakup fee, the largest such penalty in tech merger history at the time. The termination fee was the precise instrument Adobe had used against its own customers, now deployed against itself at a scale that required no fine print. The market had already absorbed the collapse of the Figma deal when the FTC lawsuit arrived 6 months later. The combined effect on investor confidence was significant. Adobe's stock, which had traded near $700 at its November 2021 peak, had already fallen substantially by mid-2024. Meanwhile, The competitive threat that the Figma acquisition was meant to neutralize had only grown. Figma continued operating independently. Canva, a cloud-based design tool built for non-professionals, reported more than 220 million users globally. Midjourney and Stable Diffusion were enabling the generation of professional-grade images without Photoshop. Runway was offering AI-powered video editing that competed directly with Premiere Pro and After Effects. None of these competitors imposed early termination fees. None of them required users to navigate multi-step cancellation flows. They built their retention through product quality rather than contractual friction. Adobe had locked customers in. The market was now offering them keys. On March 13, 2026, Adobe settled. In other words, everything the company had allegedly refused to do for years, clear disclosures, easy cancellation, honest terms, was now legally required. The price tag was $150 million. But the real punishment wasn't financial. The terms, for the record, $75 million in civil penalties to the government, another $75 million in free services to affected customers, a permanent injunction requiring Adobe to clearly disclose the early termination fee before any customer enrolls, a reminder obligation before free trials convert to paid plans, and a simple, functional cancellation mechanism, the kind any reasonable customer had always assumed existed. By the time the settlement was filed, the financial damage had spread well beyond $150 million. Adobe stock closed at $225.35 on April 10, 2026, a 67.7% collapse from its 2021 peak. The company that had reached a market capitalization of roughly $320 billion now traded at approximately $93 billion. More than $220 billion in market value had been erased. 3 decisions explain the outcome. First, Adobe confused captivity with loyalty. The early termination fee was a retention mechanism. It worked in the narrow sense. Customers who faced a $200 plus exit fee were less likely to cancel than customers who could leave freely. But retained customers are not the same as satisfied customers. The fee did not resolve the underlying dissatisfaction that prompted cancellation attempts. It suppressed it. Suppressed dissatisfaction accumulates. It finds expression in FTC complaints, in Reddit threads, in class action litigation, and eventually in government enforcement actions. Canva built 220 million users without a single termination penalty. The comparison is direct and damning. Retention through product quality compounds into loyalty. Retention through contractual friction compounds into resentment. Second, the decision to obscure material terms in the sign-up process conflated short-term conversion with long-term trust. Adobe's enrollment flow was designed to minimize friction at the point of purchase. That is legitimate commercial design. But it crossed into deception when the most consequential term of the contract, a fee that could exceed $300, was placed in fine print that most consumers never encountered. The internal acknowledgement that the fee was a bit like heroin suggests the company understood that customers, if fully informed, would behave differently. The strategy required concealment to function. Any business model that depends on customers not understanding what they have agreed to is a model with a fixed endpoint. The moment a regulator with subpoena power begins reading the enrollment flow documentation. Third, Adobe's $1 billion Figma payment revealed the strategic cost of what the retention strategy had prevented. Had Adobe built its competitive moat through product development and genuine user experience rather than contractual lock-in, the regulatory scrutiny that blocked the Figma acquisition might have been less acute. Instead, the FTC investigation was already underway when the merger was announced. The company arrived at its most important acquisition attempt already under regulatory examination. The trap it had set for customers contributed to the environment that trapped the deal. The lesson is precise. Adobe built the most dominant creative software franchise in history, and then, at its moment of maximum strength, chose friction over trust as its primary retention mechanism. The $150 million settlement is not the cost of that choice. It is merely the most recent installment. The real cost is the $230 billion erased from the company's market value between November 2021 and April 2026, accumulated across the Figma collapse, the regulatory action, and the competitive erosion that followed. Adobe taught its customers that creativity was free, then charged them to leave.